Because the Lord is my shepherd, I have everything I need. He lets me rest in the meadow's grass, He leads me beside the quiet stream. He restores my failure. It's the hope of hopes. It's the love of loves. This is the song of every man and woman. God is watching us. God is watching us.
We are committed to making Evanston a safe and welcoming place for all people. We not only respect, we embrace one another's race, ethnicity, family background, heritage, language, economic status and culture, sexual orientations and gender identities, and all abilities and special needs. Amen? Amen. We commit to act with courage, to stand up to hatred, bigotry, violence, and irrational fear, and to build bridges across and find common ground despite our country's deep divisions and the divisions in our own community. Amen? Amen. We commit to providing protection and safe space for those who are targeted because of their religion, their race, their sexual orientation, gender identity, national origin, ethnicity, immigration status, skin tone, language, culture, or health. Amen? Amen. We commit to living and working so that justice, peace, and love prevail for all people in Evanston and our whole country. Amen? Amen. And we are here because we ask you to call upon all of Evanston to join and hold accountable. Yes, brothers and sisters, hold one another accountable. The faith communities in these solemn commitments. Thank you for holding us accountable. Welcome.
So I'm going to tweet after this event that we had more people here at this service than the president had at his inauguration. A time when we ought to reflect, we ought to think really deeply about our country and about our community. In the 1940s, Martin Niemöller, a German Holocaust survivor, okay, I stress that, a German Holocaust survivor, wrote, "First they came for the socialists, and I did not speak up, because I was not a socialist. Then they came for the trade unionists, and I did not speak up because I am not a trade unionist. Then they came for the Jews, and I did not speak out because I was not a Jew. Then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak for me." Welcome, friends, neighbors, and allies. Tonight, we gather to speak out. We speak out because we know that the silence in the face of evil is evil itself. We speak out to we speak out to voice our fear for the precarious state of our country. And we speak out because history shows us that unity against injustice and oppression will prevail. Indeed, such solidarity is the cornerstone of our diverse democracy. Its absence can weaken our resolve, but its presence is a source of unyielding strength. This weekend's events in Charlottesville remind us that unity against injustice and oppression is paramount. Charlottesville shows us that, as a country, we are never far away from seeing those who would choose to normalize racism and intolerance empowered. In this case, it only took one president and his sycophants using dog whistle politics. We speak out to condemn this, and we must be specific. The rallying cry of white nationalists is one of hate, bigotry, and violence. Such views are counter to democracy and will never be acceptable in our nation or local life. Future generations must see that we are unified in our belief and actions that love, kindness, courage, and empathy were stronger than hate. As a nation founded on the ideals of democracy, but also built on the backs of racism and sexism, we must leave behind evidence of our work against bigotry and intolerance. History will judge us on our willingness to fight against any assault on our values of respect, fairness, and human dignity. This effort starts locally. This effort starts today. We must be vigilant and fearless in rooting out inequalities that exist in our own backyard. That means having our Citizen Police Complaint Assessment Committee take an honest look at our complaint process. That means looking seriously at alternatives to arrest young men in our community. And that means looking for additional ways to make our community safer and more welcoming for immigrants. Fortunately, no other citizens are better prepared to unify against hate and toward hope than those in this room and those in this city of Evanston. I'd like to bookend Martin Niemöller's quote from the 40s about the dangers of political and civic apathy with the words spoken just yesterday by the mother of Heather Heyer, the young woman killed in Charlottesville because she dared to speak out. And this is her mother speaking, and I quote, "What happened to Heather has struck a chord because we know that what she did is achievable. We don't all have to die. We don't all have to sacrifice our lives. Remember in your heart, if you're not outraged, you're not paying attention. Find what's wrong. Find what's wrong. Find what's wrong. Don't ignore it. Don't look the other way. You make a point to look at it and say to yourself, what can I do to make a difference? I'd rather have my child, but by golly, if I have to give her up, we're gonna make it count." Pretty powerful words by a mother who just lost her daughter a few days before. Pretty powerful words. By being here tonight, together as one community, this is our honoring that wish to make it count.
It is not fake to know that white nationalists, neo-Nazis, the KKK, and other similar groups are evil and mean no positive influence in our society. We know they will not intimidate us.
salty again. It is no longer good for anything except to be thrown out and trampled by men. You are the light of the world, a city on a hill that cannot be hidden.
I'm living life on a merry-go-round, and you can't find out fire. But I see it in you, so we gon' walk it out. Ooh, mountains, we gon' walk it out. And mountains, the
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله حق تقاته ولا تموتن إلا وأنتم مسلمون.
Syria. This non-Jewish woman comes to Jesus seeking healing for her sick daughter. But as the story is told, Jesus ignores her. So she begins shouting after Jesus' followers for help. And they come to Jesus, but not to ask for help on her behalf, but rather to ask for help for themselves. Jesus, they shout, send this woman away. She is bothering us. So Jesus tries to do so. Jesus tries to push this woman aside, saying, she is not one of the lost sheep of the house of Israel. She is not one of my people. She doesn't look like me. She doesn't talk like me. She doesn't have her papers in order. She may not even love the right kind of people. And her skin is too dark. No, she is not one of mine to care for. But she cries out again, saying, Lord, help me. And then when you thought it couldn't get any worse, Jesus calls her a dog. Jesus calls her a dog. Nevertheless, she persisted. I've always wanted to get that in there. Nevertheless, she persisted and said, yes, Lord, yet even the dogs eat the crumbs that fall from their master's table. And Jesus answers, woman, great is your faith. Let it be done for you as you wish. And her daughter was healed instantly. This is an odd story. It does not show Jesus, the guy that I follow, does not show Jesus in a very good light. Now he comes around in the end, but not until he has already ignored the woman and then hurled insults at her. He hurls insults at a woman who wants nothing more than the same compassionate love and healing which Jesus offers to those who look like him. Now at home, I have a bag that reads, equal rights for others does not mean less rights for you. It's not pie. Well, she knows, she trusts, she believes that there is more than enough of God's loving compassion and healing available for all. And this Canaanite woman has the courage to look Jesus in the eye and teach him what she knows to be true. And Jesus learns from this woman. Tonight, I want you to see the differences. Because those differences are what open us up to the possibility of new insights, new ways of being in the world, new ways of acting and reacting in the world, new ways of creating in this world, creating community, beloved community together. And we can look at what happened in Charlottesville, Virginia last weekend, and if we're willing to be honest, what has been happening throughout our nation's history, whether it is through an uprising of white supremacist neo-Nazis, politicians trying to pass transphobic legislation, the words of a president which seem hell-bent on division rather than unity, or the more subtle yet pervasive daily oppression that is the result of deep-rooted systemic racism in our own towns. We can look at it. We can name it for the sin that it is. And if we are willing, we can listen to and learn from the different voices around us and discover that we all are seeking at least some of the same things. Safety, love, acceptance, peace. And like Jesus, we can learn from someone else that these are not limited commodities.
Hope means not conforming ourselves to an unjust reality, but rather imagining possibilities for transformation. That means that for there to be hope, first there has to be a recognition that things as they now stand are not acceptable. I came to Evanston 14 years ago from Argentina, the land of my birth. And history has been repeating itself in terrible ways there in these past months as well as here. I am deeply saddened that in both my countries there is systemic racist violence and there are state-sanctioned complicities with that violence. None of us know how well our commitments to nonviolent resistance will hold up in extreme situations. I don't know if mine would either. The consequences of standing up peacefully to hatred can be dire, as indeed we saw on Saturday in the death of Heather Hyder. And I do feel inspired by the admonition not to turn into the very kind of human beings we deplore by mirroring their hatred. I lament the way in which white versions of Christian faith have become toxic in this country and elsewhere. I hope and pray for the transformation and conversion of those who say they are Christian, yet would try to incarcerate, deport, or perhaps even kill the brown body of Jesus if they came across it. As a Latina, pale-skinned Latina, I lament my own complicities in systemic racism and my own obliviousness to injustice. I hope and pray for continual transformation and conversion to creative, nonviolent ways of walking in justice and in fierce love.
Because the Lord is my shepherd, I have everything I need. He lets me rest in the meadow's grass, He leads me beside the quiet stream. He restores
over the last weekend, it is hard not to give up hope. But my tradition strongly says, hopelessness is godlessness. And I have been struggling since then. But last night when I saw the vigil, and I said, God, I'm so sorry. There is a hope. There is a hope for the humanity. How can we give up? Heather has given her life. As a matter of fact, her life was taken. But if you see her mother's face, you can see God still lives in us. We are not here to quit. Injustice cannot win. Hope and audacity of hope was told by somebody else who cried in the national TV. I have seen the children cry. I have seen many of these events come before us to test us. Oh Lord, the night like this, only you make it happen so we see the light. We have a responsibility. Heather's death and many like her cannot go in vain. This is not only time for tears, this is time for action.
The scripture reading from the 5 books of Moses comes from the book of Deuteronomy, chapter 11. It begins with these words. See, I place before you blessing and curse. Blessing if you heed my commandments, curse if you don't heed me, and turn away from the path that I enjoin you this day. The text is clear. It doesn't say, both are okay. God gives us clear instructions as to how to distinguish between blessing and curse, good and evil, right and wrong. God teaches us that equivocating is morally obtuse. God shows us that not taking a clear stand about what is right and wrong is moral relativism. God gives us a moral compass and points us in the direction of blessing. God says, see, I place before you blessing and curse. What are you going to choose? Tonight we gather because we want to declare loudly and emphatically that we choose the path of blessing. Tonight we say together in one voice that racism and anti-Semitism, hate and bigotry, in all their forms are the path of curse. For we know that evil triumphs when good people remain silent. State Senator and gubernatorial candidate Daniel Biss could not unfortunately be with us tonight. Yes, we do. But I spoke to him the other day and he sends his regrets and is with us in spirit. However, I did tell him that I plan to quote from the letter he wrote to his children and shared publicly, reflecting on the events of this past week. Senator Biss's grandmother was a Holocaust survivor who had been in the Auschwitz death camp in Poland during World War II. Senator Biss writes to his children, because of this family history, a Nazi salute like the ones we've seen in images from Charlottesville doesn't feel to me like a picture from the past. It makes my blood run cold, reminding me that only a stroke of luck enabled the two of you to be alive today. Not everyone has this history, and so for some people the Nazi salute is just another historical picture.
There are those who can look at that gesture and avoid the knowledge of personal existential risk. At the same time, we have extraordinary privilege that many of our fellow citizens lack. A picture of a mob of white supremacists marching with torches does not conjure up a memory of your ancestors bound in chains or hung from a tree. Life and dignity wrested from their bodies because your ancestors were not the victims of those mobs. Even more importantly, in today's society that is blemished by social and economic racial inequalities, your skin color unfortunately confers you with privilege. You cannot stop this from being the case, but you can live up to the responsibility that comes with this privilege. He continues, inside of you lies a capacity for evil that defines history's worst moments, but also inside of you lies a capacity to overcome evil with openness and love. And most importantly, inside of you lies a choice of which of these two qualities will define the life you lead. The world is a beautiful and terrifying place, but as frightening as life may sometimes be, please never doubt that each one of us has the power through our own actions to build a better world. Senator Biss makes it clear to his children that we are given a choice when faced with evil and hatred, whether directed at ourselves or others. He urges his children and all of us to confront the bigotry in our society and commit to eradicating it. We must choose the path of blessing, as God enjoins us to do today. And this goes beyond mere condemnations and expressions of horror at the most violent, bigoted language that was found a refuge in parts of our society. We must go further than that and face facts. That our society's laws and policies continue to perpetuate racism, continue to hold back people of color, continue to establish double standards for Black and white and Latino and Middle Eastern, continue to grant greater access to justice to those who are white and those who are wealthy. Today in an op-ed in the New York Times entitled, "The Other Inconvenient Truth," Charles Lowe reminded us that tiki torch-wielding white supremacists are just the tip of the racist iceberg. Institutional racism is alive and well and is condoned by so-called reasonable and good people. He reminds us how aggressive drug policies and voter suppression have a disproportionately negative impact on people of color. He writes, "This is all an outgrowth of white supremacy, a concept that many try to apply only to vocal violent racists, but it is in fact more broadly applicable and pervasive." End quote. As the late Holocaust survivor and author Elie Wiesel taught, we must take sides. Neutrality helps the oppressor, never the victim. Silence encourages the tormentor, never the tormented. Sometimes we must interfere. Wherever men and women are persecuted because of their race, religion, or political views, that place must, at that moment, become the center of the universe. End quote. We must pick a side today. We must make Charlottesville the center of the universe, and Washington, D.C. It's incumbent upon us to be on the side of blessing and not curse. 2 days ago, I had the privilege of officiating, albeit on a sad occasion, at the funeral of an amazingly talented, unique, and resilient man, John Backside. He was well known in Chicago as an architect whose unique mid-century style buildings changed the landscape of the city. He had an incredible wit and an irreverent sense of humor. He was also a Holocaust survivor. Born and raised in Hungary, he spent his late teenage years in the Mauthausen concentration camp in Austria, where he experienced unspeakable horrors, including the murder of his father by the Nazis on a long death march. Curious thing, throughout his adult life, John was a voracious reader of Holocaust literature. When asked why, after living through that nightmare, he was eager to immerse himself in books on the subject, he responded, "I'm hoping for a different ending." That was John's sense of humor. For 6 million Jews and millions of other Nazi victims in Europe, there was not a different ending. For Heather Heyer, whose life was snuffed out by a white supremacist in Charlottesville, there was not a different ending. For the countless people of color in our country who have been killed, maimed, incarcerated, and robbed of a fair shot because of the color of their skin, there was not a different ending. We cannot change the ending in this world for those who have come and gone, but we have the power to change the ending in the narrative that is still unfinished. We have power over the future. We gather tonight to turn a new page in that narrative and to write a different ending to the tragedy that saw its latest chapter written in Charlottesville last weekend. To the horror of white supremacy, to the scourge of racism, to the plague of anti-Semitism, to the evil of false equivalencies and equivocations, tonight we take sides. Tonight we declare we cannot stand by as our brothers and sisters bleed from the wounds of hatred and bigotry that continue to infect us. Tonight we commit to eradicating the curse of fascism and hatred and all of their despicable expressions. Tonight we pledge to join hands and hearts to bring the blessings of love, healing, and hope to a wounded and sorrowing nation. We are called tonight to see clearly the difference between blessing and curse, and to heed God's call to love, not hate, to care for one another and not disparage each other, to pursue justice no matter how difficult or inconvenient. Together, we will create a different ending, a different future. Amen.
also means that all lives matter. And I need for you to know that there are people that have been influenced by Charlottesville in a way where they are left in a space of anger and if not outraged. And many of them are on our college campuses. As a matter of fact, I wrote something just a day after the incident occurred, actually that night, and at the end of what I wrote, I issued a call to arms. Call to arms, of course, is what is the weapon that God has given you? My weapon is words and writing, pen. And my daughter wrote back and she said, "Dad, I thought you were a pacifist." And I said, "Of course I'm a pacifist. What do you mean?" And she said, well, you issued a call to arms. I said, well, you know me, and I think I know you. And she said, I'm not a pacifist. That was eye-opening for me. So we need to be aware that what happened in Charlottesville and what is beginning to happen around the nation today is divisive in more than just one way. It's not divisive according to race or ethnicity or sexual orientation or any of the other isms that seem to exist in our nation, but there's some psychological stuff that's going on. There's some mental stuff that is going on, and I'm struggling with that. So here we are. He sits in the Oval Office. One of his business mailing addresses is 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, Washington, D.C. He's at the helm of the once greatest democracy in the world and what was a shining example of diplomacy, civil engagement, and human relations. Far from perfect, the nation as a whole and all of its presidents at least acknowledge their shortcomings and pledge to march on the road to progress together. He is the 45th human being to serve as President of the United States of America. Today, he is the most dangerous human being in America and the world. He is a self-loving, petulant, indulging, angry, white man with a bitterness and venom aimed at all others who are not like him. His support of alt-right, white nationalists, white supremacists, the KKK, neo-Nazis, and every other white hate-filled racist group in America and the world is far more dangerous than any threat of nuclear weapons. He spoke to the world during a press conference intended to highlight infrastructure proposals to modernize our nation. Instead, he spoke from the heart about racist ideology intended to force our nation into an archaic state of hatred, supremacy, and by its very nature, subjugation and slavery. He does not get to do that. Permissible. It is not allowed. This is my America too. It is your America too. That White House he calls a dump is my White House. The credibility he seeks to give a brood of vipers whose poisonous venom seeks to tear down and destroy equality for all, justice for all, hope for all, is a stake being driven into the soul of our nation. He's not allowed to do that. Through his own words and actions, he is moving our nation toward racial, religious, and political divisions as real and dangerous as the days before the Civil War. Donald Trump does not get to start a second civil war in our nation. He is the worst, pathetic excuse of a politician. And he's not alone. Those who have supported his brand of lunacy are culpable for the crimes he is committing. He is guilty of destroying the moral fiber of our nation. He's guilty of not once being the president of all Americans. He's guilty of lying, of cheating, of corrupting, and philandering with any person, group, organization, or nation that will not support his twisted agenda. And he doesn't get to do it. This is why. My great-great-grandfather was Ison Puckett Ampey. He came from a family of free blacks living in Wayne, Indiana. He was born in 1841, the seventh child of James and Dicey Ampey. When the Civil War began, he and a brother left the Midwest and found themselves joining the 54th Massachusetts Colored Infantry. At the Battle of Fort Wagner with Union troops to help defeat the Southern uprising that threatened the unity and future of the United States, and saw his younger brother die beside him. My uncle was Charles Whelan, who fought in World War II and was stationed in the South Pacific. Both of my brothers served in the military, and one of them made a career out of it. I have nieces and nephews who have served our nation, and one of them just became Sergeant First Class in the Army. This is my America. It belongs to my family. Evanston so doggone much. I know we have our problems. I know we have our shortcomings. I'm not deluded. I'm not a pipe dreamer, but there is something about our community that has capacity to come together, to struggle together, to lament together, and to hope together. Extremists and white nationalists and white supremacists, nor the racism of the current president to ever become par for the course for Americans. They will never become average Americans. The hatred they harbor in their hearts for Jews, Muslims, Latinos, African Americans, to name a few, is the hatred my family sought to annihilate and destroy since America became America. All is not right. And pointedly wrong is what we see unfolding in the White House since Charlottesville, and they will not be allowed public voice. Desperate times call for desperate measures, Evanston. We must be filled with righteous indignation over the appalling silence of those in Trump's administration, those in the Senate, those in the House. We must demand reality that if they stand with Trump, they stand for hatred, and they stand against the very best that is in the human spirit. We must demand of our media that if they continue to give voice to hateful racists that they are interviewing on their news shows, we will not watch them. If they continue to present the charlatan and his hubris-filled followers as an alternative, we will protest against them. The heart and soul of our nation is at stake, and I don't know about you, but I, for one, stand with those who are left out, those who are oppressed, those who are suffering. I stand with the Jews. I stand with the Muslims.